Hi, 8th grade. We're starting chapter 10 today. We begin with square root functions. Our skill today is to graph each of the functions and then compare them to the parent graph and describe the domain and range of the new equation. So let's start with the parent graph. The parent graph is the basic beginner equation, okay, which is the f of x or y, right, the function of whatever, is equal to the square root of x. This is the parent graph. It will never change. This is always the parent graph. So if we want to find out what that looks like, we can start with basic xy table. -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And then we can plug in and solve, right? So f, the function of -2, and we square root it. Can we find the square root of a negative? I hope you said no. There's no real solution, okay? And for any negative. So that's going to be the case for both -2 and -1. So to make sure we have enough points, I'm just going to add on a couple more, maybe 3 and 4. Okay, plug it back in. So the function of 0 is the square root of 0. So that means that y is equal to 0. The function of 1, when we plug in, the square root of 1 is 1. The function of 2, when we plug that in, the square root is 1.41. In a calculator, the function of 3, when we square root, 1.7 something, I think maybe is 3. The function of 4 is 2. Okay, and then we graph. We start at 0, 0. We continue to graph 1, 1, then 2, 1.5 ish, 1.41, 3, almost 2, 4 is 2. So it's a nice smooth curve. This is the parent graph. So all of the questions, all the examples that we're going to be doing today, we're going to be comparing to this graph. If we were in school, we would have made this graph on a big coordinate plane and stuck it in our whiteboards so that all of the new graphs we could put on top of it to make for easy comparing. If you're at home and you want to do that, by all means. We're going to dive into what these problems are going to look like, okay? So if we take an example that maybe says the function of x is equal to the square root of x plus 2. I'll start it out the exact same way. So we have an xy table. We're not even going to bother with negatives because we're working with square roots. So we'll start with 0. Maybe go to 4. And then we'll plug them in. Okay. So once we have our coordinates, we can graph it. So 0 on the x, but up 2. 1, 3, 2, 3.5, 3, 3 and almost 3/4, 4 and 4. Okay, so this is our new graph. All right, so we graph. The second thing we need to do now is compare to the parent graph. So how has this changed? The easiest way to check is to check where we started. Okay, so here we started at the origin, here we started up to. So we'll simply state that. Shifted up 2 units. All right, and then we need to describe the domain and the range. So the domain, remember, is your x, and then the range is your y, and y. Didn't leave myself a lot of room. So the x is 0 and the positive. So it's greater than or equal to 0. And then the y starts at 2 and continues up. So it is greater than or equal to 2. Both of these are our answers. Okay, let's try another one. Let's say we have the function of x when we have 4 times the square root of x. Again, we're going to start with our xy table, 0 through 4 to give us 5 points. Sub in and solve. What do we say, 4, 1? Then we graph it. I'm going to add a little bit so that I can keep them each worth 1. So that I'll be able to compare. I don't want to change it to like count by 2. It'll be harder to compare with the parent graph. So this one starts at 0, 0, same, and then 1 and 4. 2, 5, 0.6-ish, 3 and 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0.9, so almost 7, and then 4 and 8. And then it continues on. So we want to make a curve. Okay, so if we're comparing, if I start the domain and the range, the x is greater than or equal to 0, and so is the y in this case because we started at the origin. So we started at the same spot as our parent, but our parent graph looks very different, okay? So we have to be able to explain that in some way. So multiplying by 4 makes it steeper, faster. Okay? This has a steeper rise compared to its parent. Okay, the parent graph. All right, let's do one more. Before I give you some problems to try. F of x is equal to negative 2x square root of x. When we start with a negative, that usually means we're going to have a negative graph. So that's going to be what we're going to end up with and have to compare to the original parent. Set this up with an x and y table. when you've got it graphed, it should look like this. We've got a down negative slope pointing to the right. We'll still find the domain and the range. So here, x is still positive starting with 0, so x is greater than or equal to 0. But our y is negative, so we're going to say it's less than or equal to 0. And then if we compare this to our original parent graph, we can say multiplying, I mean, there's a few things, right? So I would say multiplying by a negative reflected the graph over the, let's see, x-axis. Right, so instead, this is where it was, up here, and now it's reflected on this side of x. And it's also a bit steeper, much like the last one. So I might also say multiplying by 2 made it steeper. Okay. For homework today, we are on page 624. Try some odd problems. 15, 17, 19, 29, 33, and 35. 6 problems. Okay? Good luck, 8th grade.